Now that we've gone over some of the types of cameras out there, let's dive in to the camera itself. We're not going to be talking so much about the lens right now, but more so, what's inside this camera. On this camera, you have a mirror. On electronic viewfinder, you won't have a mirror. That's one of the major differences. But what you will have in both is a shutter and a sensor. The shutter is a key part in controlling the amount of light that comes through your lens and hits your sensor. And ultimately what it's doing is it's moving up and down very quickly, and that's establishing how much light is allowed in to expose on your film or sensor. Some cameras, you go up to 1/8,000th of a second, and it really is just, you only want light for that really microsecond. Other times you'll do 30-second exposures, and these are all things we're going to cover throughout this course, so don't worry, we'll get more into that. But let's just go over the basics. So the shutter moves up and down at a certain speed that you set, and that determines how much light enters and hits your sensor or film to expose it and take a picture. So now I'm going to talk about the sensor or film plane, and there really is a big difference here, because when you look at something like 70mm film versus 35mm film versus 16mm film or 8mm film, you can see the size difference. And that's the same thing when you go into digital photography. You have your full frame sensor camera, you have your APS-C, you have your micro four thirds. All of these sensors allow you to capture light, but each has its own limitation. A full frame sensor camera is going to be able to capture a lot more light than a smaller micro four thirds, just because it's larger. It's able to let more light in. These are things that we'll dive a little bit deeper into later on in this course, but it's important when looking at cameras, is it a full frame camera? Is it a crop sensor camera? Because that also changes, what type of lenses you put on it. It changes the amount of light that you're going to be able to use. So when talking about, what's inside of your camera, it's really thinking about the shutter and the sensor. There are many other things going on around the camera, in terms of, different settings and all that type of stuff. But when you talk about what's inside the camera, those are sort of the key parts to focus on. So now that we've looked inside the camera, we're going to start talking about what happens after the fact. And in the next section, we'll be talking about file formats.